Hey everybody, this is Mr. Cope and I'm here to talk to you today about society and how that fits into the Persian chart and how we can use that to fill in our note sheet and how we can use it to help us review as well. So first off, what is a society? Well, basically, societies are a group of people that are organized in order to benefit the people within those groups and within the larger collection of multiple groups. But that doesn't mean that everybody within the groups have equal access to wealth, power, and prestige. These are the three typically defining characteristics of society. So who has money, who has the ability to make decisions, and who has the honor basically within society. There are three types of societies. Those are egalitarian, where there's more equality. There are rank societies, where people are kind of ranked and their jobs are based on that. And then there are stratified societies that are based on some sort of class distinction or class weighting. Today we're going to talk about two different types of stratified societies in particular, because in industrial countries and post-industrial countries like the United States, there is a tendency to form in a stratified way. So the first stratified society is what's called a class society. This is also known as a mobile society because there's the notion that you can move up and down within the classes. That'd be like the United States, like the flag that you see on the top here. Second type of society is called a rigid society or a caste society. And that is a society where there's little to no movement within your lifetime. You are born into a particular caste, or you're born into a particular segment of society, and you stay there your whole life. You interact with the people of that society your whole life. So, what's a mobile society? You can see here, there's an image that's drawn about what does a capitalist society look like? And this would be a society very similar to what the United States uses. And then, so in this society, most people in each individual class have a similar lifestyle, and they have a similar amount of wealth, they have a similar amount of power, and they have a similar amount of prestige, but they can change it because they can move up within the social classes, and conversely, they can also move down within the social classes, depending on how successful you are and how that benefits you in those three categories of wealth, prestige, and power. The six main classes in a mobile society are typically the capitalist class, and that's at the top, the upper middle class, which would be the next step down, the middle class, which would be your third level from the top, the working class, which would be your fourth level from the top, the fifth level from the top, or the second to last class would be your working poor, and then the bottom class is what's called the underclass. Brief kind of description of all of the different classes so that you can understand them. Hopefully this image helps you understand the capitalist class a little bit more, or some perceptions on the capitalist class a little bit more, but I'm going to talk a little bit more with some precise information about the capitalist class. They're made up of people who have the majority of the money. In the United States, the capitalist class would be quite literally made up of just 1% of the population. It's not simply a political term that's used. 1% of the population does in fact make up our capitalist class today. And these people are typically old money. Their families have made money and they've had money for generations. They are executives of businesses and large business owners. So these would be the Bill Gates and Steve Jobs of society. They gain their power largely because they control the means of production, which means they have the power over the jobs that are created within the country. The upper middle class is slightly different than the capitalist class. They do the next 14% of society in the United States. These people are highly educated, meaning they not only have a college degree, but typically have a master's degree or a PhD or a doctor's degree or lawyer's degree, something along those lines, and they are performing jobs that require you to have an advanced degree. The next two classes would be the middle class and the working class. The middle class are perceived typically to be some of the hardest working people in society, and they have a modest income. By modest, we mean that they're relatively secure. It means that they are living a very stable life, and they have some potential for social mobility. And this comes from the fact that they have a stable life, they have a stable income, and they likely have a college education as well, which affords them the opportunity to potentially move to the upper middle class later in life. The working class typically have jobs that only require a high school education. Some of them will have other training beyond high school, but typically the only education that they have received would be a high school education. And the jobs that the working class are performing are jobs that are highly supervised. And these would be stable jobs, but they are jobs that only provide an adequate income. And so as a result of only having an adequate income, which would be good enough to survive off of, people in the working class are vulnerable to harsh economic times. If there's an economic downturn, they will very likely suffer as a result of that. And that is going to be something that is going to hinder their potential for economic mobility upwards. They are also very unlikely to move downwards unless there are hard economic times. However, they would be the first class that would move to a lower class. And then the last two groups within a mobile society are the working poor and the underclass. The working poor, I think, are best articulated by the image that you see here to the right, where you have this elderly man who is still having to work a minimum wage job so that he can, earn a living. And he's in a temporary job as a result of that. These people tend to be undereducated, maybe not completing high school or having just completed high school. And they are typically living paycheck to paycheck, which makes them extremely vulnerable economically. And even in good economic times, they are vulnerable because of the potential for sickness or some sort of other major setback that could happen where they could very easily fall into the underclass. The underclass are people that are almost essentially out of the class system in a capitalist class society like the United States. These people are chronically unemployed, meaning they have had long periods of time where they don't have a job. And oftentimes this is a result of the fact that maybe they're suffering from some sort of mental illness, there's some sort of addiction, there's a large amount of violence that's in their life. They might be homeless, or most likely it's some sort of combination of all of those issues is what is keeping them in the underclass. And the underclass are very likely not going to be very mobile in a mobile society. Now, a rigid society or caste society is going to be different because where you are placed within society is determined by your birth. And each person within the rigid society will be living a very similar lifestyle, have a similar amount of wealth, a similar amount of power, and a similar amount of prestige to everybody within their caste within society. The only difference with this compared to a mobile society is there is no potential for movement up or down within the society. In a traditional Hindu caste society, which is one of the best examples of a rigid society, there are 5 main castes, and those are the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, the Shudras, and the Untouchables, and you can see a chart to the right. Because each caste is rigidly defined, this is called a Varna. A Varna is another word for a caste. And each Varna has a job that is associated with it. So each caste, in other words, has a job that is associated with it. And because societies are so large, especially a Hindu society in India is so large with potentially over 1 billion people that would fall into this, there are subcategories within each Varna that are called jati. So if you take a look, the Shudras would have multiple jati within the Shudra caste, meaning there would be multiple jobs that the Shudras would be performing. Not all the Shudras perform all the jobs. So I would be born into a particular jati within the varna of the Shudra. And each person is expected to behave according to the rules of their jati and to their varna. You only interact in a rigid society or in Hindu society, Hindu caste system. You only interact with people within your varna and people within your jati, really. And so what happens here is this links you socially and economically to your caste, to your class system. And just a quick description of each of the different castes. Remember, at the top were the Brahmins. So these were the priests and these are the scholars, because these are the most prized and highly sought after jobs within society. They have the most prestige. The Kshatras were the warriors. In Hindu society, the Vaishyas were the tradespeople. So these were the business people. These were the people that were creating the economy. And as we move on, we go to the Shudras. These were the cultivators and the servants. These were your working class people. These were your hardworking individuals within society. So this was your largest group. And then the last group, were called the untouchables, very much like the underclass in America today, very much outside of the system, because they're really perceived in a very negative light. Today, the term that you'd want to use to describe the untouchables would be Dalit. The higher castes are most interested, of course, in maintaining the system, because they're the ones that benefit the most from this system in a rigid society, specifically a Hindu rigid society. I hope this helps you better understand the two different types of class systems that we talked about here, where we have the mobile class system and we have the rigid class system. The mobile class system would be very similar to the American capitalist class system, and the rigid class system would be very similar to the Hindu caste system. Thanks. If you have any questions, just stop by room 206 before school, after school, or during lunch. Cheers.